Hey everyone, welcome to Keto and Crime. Today I have a reaction to the sentencing of our old friend, Dime Store Barbie, Family Dollar Barbie, General Dollar Barbie, however you want to phrase it, Lori Vallow. I was not able to watch this live. I've been listening to it. The victim impact statements have been gut-wrenching, to say the least. I highly recommend you look for this on YouTube and watch it in its entirety. But I'm going to react to the last 25 minutes of it or so, which includes Lori's statement plus the actual sentencing. I'm sure you already know what the sentence is. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole, which is throwing the book at her. That's as much as Judge Boyce could do. But this has been a long time coming. Not only did we cover the entire trial and everything leading up to it, we still got Chad Daybell out there awaiting his trial. I think he'll end up pleading it out, but we'll see. We also had Lori filing a number of motions to block certain people from doing victim impact statements, which I think that is just a final spit in the face of those that she's wronged, which is a lot of people. Beyond the victims themselves, she's wronged a lot of people. But with that being said, we're going to listen to Lori's statement. I have not heard it yet, so I wanted to do sort of a live react with you, and let's get going.
Peace comes through love. Love is manifested in this case through hope. We ask the court to show mercy and look to the future. We ask the court for a 20-year fixed term plus life indeterminate, concurrent for all 5 counts of murder and conspiracy to commit murder.
So 20 years plus life. Notice he didn't say anything about parole. He was asking pretty much for a chance for her to get out on parole. But yeah.
We would ask the court to give Lori Daybell a 14-year concurrent sentence for the grand theft to run concurrent with each one of the other charges. We can do this, Judge. We can move forward towards peace again and heal, which is what we really need to do.
The family members that she's wronged will never heal. They will never heal. The whole thing about let's get closure, that doesn't happen when somebody you love is taken from you through the greed and evil of someone else.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you for the recommendations, Mr. Thomas. All right, Ms. Vallow, before I impose sentence, if you choose, you may address the court. This is known as the right of allocution, which permits you to make a statement on your own behalf or present any information in mitigation of the punishment for the crimes you've committed. And let me inquire at this time, do you wish to address this court? All right, very well, you may make your statement.
Lori just loves to hear herself speak.
I would like to start by quoting John from the New Testament in the Bible. In John chapter 8, verse 7, Jesus says, "He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her." Then in verse 15, Jesus says, "Ye judge after the flesh, I judge no man. And yet if I judge, my judgment is true."
Look at the look on Judge Boyce's face. He's like, bitch, are you saying I don't have the right to judge you? And also the woman that Jesus was defending was a prostitute or an adulterer. I'm not saying that he doesn't feel the same toward, murderers himself, but that's Jesus. And we're talking, spiritual judgments. Judge Boyce is not putting spiritual judgment on you. He's putting legal. And Jesus also said, render unto God what is God's and render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And he was referring to the law, man-made law. So there you go. I can also quote scripture for my own needs and wants.
knows me, and Jesus understands me. I mourn with all of you who mourn my children and Tammy.
Don't. No, you don't.
Knows the truth of what happened here. Jesus Christ knows that no one was murdered in this case. Accidental deaths happen. Suicides happen. Fatal side effects from medications happen.
3 accidental deaths. Your children were found bound and gagged. Buried, bound, and gagged. Why would they, if they were dead from some sort of accident, why would you need to tie their hands, wrap tape around their mouths, and then bury them? You call the cops. Yeah, you tried to fake it with Tammy. At least 𝗙𝗵𝗁 did. But you got caught. These people were murdered, and you led the charge.
I have a different perspective in life
Delusional
because
twist.
in 2002, when I was pregnant with her, I died in the hospital while in labor with her. They tried to stop my labor. They put me on the table and they put some IV, and I felt my spirit falling to the floor. I was standing near my pregnant body, watching the doctors try to revive me, which took them a few minutes. In that time, my sister Stacy was standing to my left. I turned to hug her and was surprised that her spirit was as tangible as a physical body, because I knew I was in spirit and she was in spirit. She said she needed to show me some things, and we went to heaven. I later returned to my body.
This reads just like many of the apocalyptic scenes that we saw in 𝗙𝗵𝗁's books and the books of Julie Rowe. That tour of heaven by some dead relative or dead famous biblical person or dead famous person. You're just making it up from the same script, and you're a brainless, evil twit.
And the spirit world. Since then, I have had many communications from people now living in heaven, including my children, Tylee Ashlyn and Joshua Jackson, my sisters, Stacy and Lolly, my aunts and my uncles, and my grandparents. I have had many communications with Jesus Christ, the Savior of this world, and our heavenly parents. I've had many angelic visitors have come and communicated with me and even manifested themselves to me. Because of these communications, I know for a fact that my children are happy and busy in the spirit world. Because of my communications with my friend Tammy 𝗙𝗵𝗁, I know that she is also very happy and extremely busy. I have always mourned the loss of my loved ones, and I have lost many in this mortal world. However, I know that more than most people. I know where they are now and what they're.
Okay, most people would say this is just proof that she believes her own delusions or she's a really great liar. I don't know which. But what this really shows me is that she has zero value for the life in this world, which through anything that we can grasp onto, and I don't want to offend anybody if you're a person of faith, this life is the only life that we know for sure, 100% sure, through matters of just true knowledge and true science that we have. The afterlife has never and will never be proven. It can't be proven because you have to die to get there if there is one. And this whole rigmarole, it just shows how little she values the quote-unquote mortal life and how every single life is disposable to these people. They would have no quandary about killing anybody that got in what they thought their destiny's way was. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Sick for it every single day.
Let's send
I know we all lived in heaven before we were born on earth, and we were all adult spirits in the heavenly realm. We chose to come to earth as...
You note that they got the death penalty taken off the table for her. If she's so homesick for heaven, go. Let's send her there. But notice how they got that removed from her table. She values her mortal life.
I do not fear death, but I look forward to it. I did not want to return to my body when I was out of it. Even though my son Colby, who I adored more than anything, was only 6 years old at the time, and I was about to give birth to this new baby girl that I wanted so badly. I was a young mother, and you would think I wouldn't want to leave my children, but as I stood in heaven, I did not want to go back. I thought they would be fine without me because I was peaceful and I was happy and I was home. But then I was told by Jesus that I needed to go back and complete things that I had covenanted or promised to do before I was born. This caused me a lot of distress because I knew heaven was my real home, and I only wanted to be there. I was free from pain, emotional and physical. But then I was shown how I would help my children and others in the future. So ultimately, I did agree to go back to my body. 𝗙𝗍 has visited me. She is happy and very busy. 𝗙𝗍 is free now from all the pains of her life. 𝗙𝗍 suffered horrible physical pain her whole life. I sat with 𝗙𝗍 in the hospital year after year after year while she screamed in pain when the morphine wasn't even enough to take away the pain of her pancreatitis. I sat there while she cried and I held back her hair while she threw up. And I am the only person on this earth who knows how much 𝗙𝗍 suffered in her life. She had pain every single day. She never felt good. Her body did not work right. And I don't know if that was from complications from me dying while she was being born or something else, but she had a very difficult life. She was sexually abused by her own biological father since she was 3 years old, and she was forced by family court to go visit him for 10 years against her will. I fought for her in court. I protected her. I tried to protect her with my whole life. I tried to protect her. I worried about her every single day. 𝗙𝗍 had to get her GED because she couldn't go to school every day because she never felt good. She felt sick. Nobody knows this because 𝗙𝗍, like myself, tries to put on a good front, tries to be a happy person, tries to have hope in life, tries to know that she's here for a purpose and that she has an eternal purpose to be on this earth. But I never stopped worrying about her. One of the times that 𝗙𝗍 came to me as a spirit after she died, she commanded me and she said to me, "Stop worrying, Mom. We are fine." She knows how I worry and how I miss her. The first time JJ visited me after he passed away, he put his arm around me and he said to me, "You didn't do anything wrong, Mom. I love you. And I know you loved me every minute of my life." JJ, Joshua Jackson, was an adult spirit. And he was very, very tall when he put his arm around me. He is busy. He is engaged. He has jobs that he does there. And he is happy where he is. His life was short, but JJ's life was meaningful. JJ was a wonderful person and touched the lives of everyone. And I adored him every minute of his life. My eternal friend, Tammy Daybell, has visited me on several occasions. She came to bring me peace and comfort, and I know that she is extremely busy helping her family, especially her children and grandchildren. And I have a great love for Tammy. My beautiful children, Tylee Ashlyn and Joshua Jackson, rest safely this day in the arms of Jesus. My wonderful friend, Tammy Daybell, rests safely this day in the arms of Jesus. And I look forward to the day when we are all reunited and I too will rest with them in the arms of my Jesus.
All right, Ms. Vallow, thank you for your comments to the court. Let me
I swear to God, I thought he was about to say thank you for your candor, and that would have been perfect if he had.
ask at this time, Ms. Vallow, are you fully satisfied with the representation you've? Thank you. All right, the court will conclude then with my own review of the matter and then pronounce sentence. Ms. Vallow, based on the jury's verdict of guilty in this case, it is the judgment of this court that you're guilty of the following counts of the amended indictment. Count 1, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan and grand theft by deception. Count 2, first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan. Count 3, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow and grand theft by deception. Count 4, first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow. Count 5, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell. And count 7, grand theft. We carefully reviewed the record of this case, beginning with your prior criminal history. Very notably, you're 50 years old. These are the first criminal convictions you've ever had. I will note, however, in addition to these convictions, you have 2 additional conspiracy to commit first-degree murder cases pending in Arizona. And it's somewhat incredible in this case that seeing you've gone from no criminal history in your life to now having been convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and you continue to face more additional counts of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder in another state. I've looked at the recommendations in the pre-sentence investigation report. It ultimately recommends a prison sentence stating, quote, incarceration under the custody of the Idaho Board of Correction. Normally, the court would have some additional information to rely on in fashioning its sentence, including the benefit of recommendations based on a gain evaluation, substance abuse report, mental health review, and other reports. However, you elected not to cooperate with the pre-sentence investigation. As I would note on page 23 of the pre-sentence investigation report, it states, quote, Lori Vallow Daybell intends to remain silent during the pre-sentence investigation process. She has the packet, but does not intend to answer any questions of evaluators or investigators. Quote, no attempts were made to complete the court-ordered screenings due to her refusal. I'm advising you that that was your choice to not cooperate in the pre-sentence investigation, but it left me without some additional information that potentially could have been mitigating in your case. And as I proceed with the sentencing, I'll note those deficiencies in the information I normally would have in a pre-sentence investigation report. As has been mentioned by both sides here, the court has to consider certain sentencing objectives when I sentence somebody, and these are set out in cases including State versus Toohill, which is a Court of Appeals case, 103 Idaho 565, and it's been adopted by our Supreme Court as well. And I have to consider for main objectives, number 1, the protection of society, which is the primary objective. 2, deterrence of the individual and public generally. 3, possibility of rehabilitation. And 4, punishment or retribution for wrongdoing. That case states, moreover, it's clear as a matter of policy in Idaho, the primary consideration is the good order and protection of society. All other factors must be subservient to that end. I've also reviewed and considered the criteria set forth in an Idaho statute, 1925-21, on the question of whether or not you should be confined to prison and to what extent. That statute sets out a variety of factors I have to consider in weighing whether a long prison term here would be appropriate. Some of the attorneys cited already to some of the provisions of that statute, and again, it talks about the primary consideration of the protection of society, and also talks about the impact on the victim, the possibility of risk reduction through rehabilitation, and deterrence are also to be considered. There are some factors laid out in that statute that are not necessarily controlling, but weigh in favor against either imprisonment, or in this case where imprisonment's required, an extensive imprisonment term. Some of those factors under Part 2 of this statute is the defendant's criminal conduct neither caused nor threatened harm, which is clearly not the case here. That the defendant did not contemplate the conduct would cause or threaten harm. Again, that would not apply here. The defendant's criminogenic needs indicate the defendant will benefit from supervision and treatment in the community. That's unavailable, as community treatment can't occur with a minimum prison sentence required here. Another factor, were there substantial grounds tending to excuse or justify the defendant's criminal conduct, though failing to establish a defense. I don't find those apply given the facts of this case. Other factors, the victim of the defendant's criminal conduct induced or facilitated the commission of the crime. That did not occur here. Another part talks about compensation, which I don't find would be appropriate here other than on the grand theft charge. Part G, the defendant has no history of prior delinquency or criminal activity or has led a law-abiding life for a substantial period of time before the commission of the present crime. That is the single most mitigating factor I see in the that at your age you have no prior criminal history and now you sit here convicted of the most serious of charges. I also have to consider whether the criminal conduct was the result of circumstances unlikely to recur. Based on the evidence in this case, and in particular, considering the statement you just made to the court, I find it weighs against me finding in mitigation for that factor. And then finally, the character.
That was a very nice way of him saying you're still crazy, and you would remove anybody that you didn't feel was allowing you to complete your destiny.
Aggravation, we have more factors to consider. Is there an undue risk that during the period of a suspended sentence or probation, the defendant would commit another crime harmful to another person? Would a lesser sentence depreciate the seriousness of the defendant's crime? Will imprisonment provide appropriate punishment and deterrent to the defendant? Will imprisonment provide an appropriate deterrent for other persons in the community? And a factor that would not apply here is the defendant a multiple offender or professional criminal. I don't have an LSI score, which is one value I can look at to help determine whether or not you'd be likely to reoffend. I don't have that because you wouldn't cooperate with the report. So considering here,
I love how Judge Boyce is getting in all these zingers. And you can tell by that, plus the look on his face the entire time she was giving her statement that he thinks she's just absolutely batshit crazy.
You've served a very long time of local jail, over 1,200 days, and the report is you've been a great inmate, never caused a problem for anyone in the jail. And you should be commended for that. And that also shows that you are capable of that. I believe your counsel when they tell me you're an intelligent person. Up until all these events began to transpire, you've achieved goals in your life, you've done important things in your life. And I'd note that despite some of the comments here today, I have found that during my interactions with you throughout this long case, including your trial, you've been respectful of the court. Do we know what this beeping is that keeps going off? Sorry. All right, the court will next consider, and I think it must be considered in mitigation, that you do have mental health issues. I've dealt with those throughout the context of this case where there were commitment proceedings. I've reviewed those reports and have that personal information from having gone through the determinations of whether or not you were competent or fit to stand trial. The most current diagnosis the court has is from Dr. Watson, and from February of this year states you suffer from, and I'll quote, delusional disorder, mixed type with bizarre content and hyper-religiosity, continuous and unspecified personality disorder with histrionic and narcissistic features. So obviously a very complex diagnosis that's been made here. Whether or not that can or how it would be treated, I think by all accounts is unknown at this time. I've reviewed your personal history, including statements from your own immediate family members, and it's clear that something radically changed in you that led you to where you are today. In a statement made in the pre-sentence investigation report, your mother stated it perhaps best and said that you are not now, quote, the person she knew. The record in this case, including all the evidence I observed during the jury trial, indicates that if it wasn't already occurring, that this relationship with the co-defendant seemed to be a catalyst for the change. At this point, I'll note that I will not be making comments on any other co-defendants in this case, as your co-defendant is currently presumed innocent and awaiting trial. In sum, there are significant mitigating factors the court has to consider here when I consider you and your life as a whole, and that does make the case difficult. Typically, when I see somebody to be sentenced and they don't have a prior criminal history, they're given opportunities to first prove themselves on probation or avoid a lengthy term of incarceration. However, of course, some crimes are so serious that even with mitigation, there is no other reasonable option except for a prison term and a long prison term. And sadly, you've been convicted of and have committed the most serious crimes possible, and those crimes also require an equally serious punishment. So this is the part where I will consider what I think are the factors in aggravation. I went through those factors in the statute that I look at, and as I'll explain, I find that 5 of those factors weigh against you and in favor of a lengthy period of imprisonment. First, the case itself. I'll discuss that. There was a lot of pretrial litigation in the case. You decided to take your case to a jury trial. I will state and emphasize that I firmly believe it's the right of every person in our country to exercise their right to a jury trial, and they're afforded the full due process of the law. It's been somewhat disheartening to me to realize that there are many people who think that they can predetermine a case and somebody shouldn't be afforded their full rights of due process before they are convicted of a crime. Well, I didn't make all of the rules that govern criminal cases, but I took an oath to uphold the rules that are there, and I make every effort to ensure that people's due process is protected, because that's an important duty of mine. Everyone has a right to be presumed innocent, and everyone in a criminal case does have a right to a jury trial. Sometimes I feel like maybe too many cases settle, and there should be more trials because it's a right people are entitled to exercise. You exercise that right, and I in no way hold it against you that you decided to have your case determined by a jury. That's your right, and it does not impact or influence my decision in sentencing. Before trial, I did not delve into all of the evidence or facts of this case and only address those when necessary to make rulings on motions, because I wanted to keep objective through the proceedings and remain impartial. You were afforded all of your due process in this case, and ultimately, after presentation of the evidence, a jury did find you guilty on all counts. I bring that up now because when there is a trial, I learn and see all of the facts along with the jurors. And that's a different scenario than when someone enters a plea and I'm only allowing argument in a sentencing and not sitting through the evidence as I did here. Having considered all of the evidence that I saw at trial along with the jurors, it's been a difficult task for me to narrow down and articulate all of the aggravating factors, because really there are so many here. Murder is the most serious offense. And the most unimaginable type of murder is to have a mother murdering her own children, and that's exactly what you did. You were involved in and guilty of conspiring to murder another group of children's mother, 𝗓𝗓𝗍𝗶𝗄, who had children of her own. And despite the jury convicting you with overwhelming evidence, you still sit here before the court today and said you didn't do it. You came here to East Idaho, where I've spent my life, and moved here from another place already with plans in progress to make your children disappear. The evidence bore that out at trial. You removed your children from their home in Arizona, alienated them from friends and family, got rid of JJ's service dog. You moved to Rexburg, a community where you could find 1,000 random families to take your children, and you brought them here to murder them. You had so many other options. You could have gotten divorced. You could have found someone to take care of those kids. But as the state was able to prove at trial, you chose the most evil and destructive path possible. You killed those children, according to the state's theory, and I believe it, to remove them as obstacles and to profit financially.
Boyce is here to... He's not here to play. He's here to slay. And you can tell it. I mean, look at her. She's slumping in her seat more and more as he's talking. He does not buy this whole charade of hers. He knows she's just an evil, deluded person. And that's pretty obvious. Yep, it's a nice way of saying you still crazy.
Life in Hawaii, countless law enforcement officers, family members, and volunteers were searching for your children. And I don't think to this day you have you caused for others who looked for your children when you knew where they were.
Nope, she doesn't. She doesn't care. She got what she wanted. She got free of her children, and now she's just trying to avoid being punished for that. She doesn't see as what she did was wrong. She sees those children's lives as lives that she was free to take because they were her children, and that Chad was free to take his own wife's life to remove her as an obstacle.
For them, and that was blood money you kept for yourself. And that's the grand theft charge you've been convicted of. Your sister, your son talked to you, begged with you while you were in the jail during phone calls I heard at trial, and those were very sad and difficult calls to hear. And you didn't provide any assistance or comfort to them. During the trial, when the evidence came out about how these children were found and the state they were in, you wanted to be excused and not have to watch the evidence. And we're fine to let all the other people in the courtroom, including the jurors, have to bear through that. However, I ruled that you did have to sit and watch and see the result of your heinous crimes. The jurors in your case fulfilled their duty admirably. All 18 jurors we had, because we had alternates, went through the entire trial and faithfully fulfilled all their obligations and all the. We were able to get impartial jurors who weren't already tainted by pretrial publicity to decide your case. And I do thank the jurors publicly for the service they rendered. Those jurors I noted during the trial were very good at keeping their emotions in check and keeping stone-faced as they're supposed to do and be objective until the case is done and submitted. However, I did note at certain times during the trial, such as when there were videos and pictures shown of you in Hawaii at this time frame when JJ and 𝗙𝗍𝗍 were lying in shallow graves, the disgust on the faces of those jurors was evident, and shocking revelations about what happened here just kept coming through the trial. The crime scene was a horrific thing to have to review, and there's images that I will never get out of my mind, and I'm just looking at the pictures. Law enforcement officers who had to deal with the aftermath of what you did, I'm sure were traumatized. And I know it was traumatic as well for the jurors who had to sit through and see the photographs of these dead and mutilated and buried children. For those people who loved and cared about JJ and 𝗙𝗍𝗍 and Tammy Daybell, to have to see those photographs of them through trial of their dead and desecrated bodies must have been devastating. Tammy Daybell was murdered as a result of your conspiracy. She was, by all accounts, a healthy, happy mother and wife through a lot of her life, and you were out shopping for wedding rings to marry her husband while she was still alive. You were planning a wedding to her husband while she was still alive. You haven't shown any remorse for any of those actions, and she ended up being murdered, buried, had to be disinterred later so an autopsy could be performed in order to prove the evidence of what you had done. She didn't deserve any of that. You took her life away. You destroyed that family, fractured it to the point where, in the information I've had through the PSI, there are relationships that will probably never be mended that have rippled as a result of what's happened. JJ and 𝗙𝗍𝗍, of course, 7 years.
Assuming he's meaning that relationships between Chad and his children, or possibly, Chad and the Tammy's family, will probably never heal.
Old, 16 years old, were separate people whose lives were cut way too short because of you. Never got to grow up and be adults. For everyone, that you took them away from this world. And it is the most shocking thing, really, I can imagine, is that a mother killed her own children and you simply have no remorse for it. Even sitting here today, there's no remorse for what you did. After all of this evidence through trial, you haven't shown any remorse. You haven't said you're sorry. You haven't done anything to seek leniency from this court. There's been a lot of people during trial and here who explained the devastation you're responsible for, and you've forever altered the lives, not in a good way, for many, many people, destroying family relationships, taking people away that were loved, cared for, and needed. You may not believe to this day that you've done anything wrong, and you still may think you're justified by your religious beliefs for what happened here. I'm not here to judge that, but I don't believe that any God in any religion would want to have this happen, what happened here. And your crimes are heinous and egregious, and that alone can constitute a major aggravating factor that requires me to impose a serious length of incarceration. So after weighing all those factors, I need to in aggravation, I find that the sentences I'm about to impose will serve the interest of justice by, number one, preventing you from ever doing this again, that they will not depreciate the seriousness of your crimes, will punish you appropriately, and will serve to deter both you and others. So that concludes the aggravating factors the court considered. At this time then, I am prepared to pronounce sentence. Mr. Thomas, Mr. Archibald, and the defendant, would you please rise for the pronouncement of sentence? Based on all the relevant circumstances, including the evidence and recommendations presented in court today, it's the judgment of this court. Ms. Vallow, you'll be sentenced as follows. I'll first note I'm going to take up the counts out of order as I want to address the substantive murder sentences first. So on count 2, the charge you were convicted of, the first-degree murder of 𝗙𝗍𝗄𝗏 Ryan, you are sentenced to the custody of the State Board of Corrections to serve the maximum allowed sentence of fixed determinate term of life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. On count 4, the charge of the first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow, you are sentenced to the custody of the State Board of Corrections to serve the maximum allowed sentence, a fixed determinate life imprisonment sentence with no possibility of parole. I'll next address the 3 conspiracy counts you've been convicted of, and note under Idaho Code 18-1701, the punishment for those crimes is the same as the underlying offenses you combined to commit. One of the offenses you combined to commit was first-degree murder, so those may be punishable also by imprisonment for life. When I look at what the appropriate sentences should be for the conspiracy charges, at first I wondered if they should be as long of a term or serious as the substantive murder charges. However, what I've concluded is that these conspiracy convictions merit the same grave punishment for several reasons. First, the conspiracies in which you engaged in have had far-reaching impacts on many people besides the deceased victims. And with what the court's heard, I am convinced that the conspiracy charges also merit the same serious sentence. So on count 1, the conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of 𝗙𝗍𝗄𝗏 Ryan and grand theft by deception, you're sentenced to the custody of the State Board of Corrections to serve the maximum allowed sentence, a fixed determinate term of life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. On count 3, the conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow and grand theft by deception, you're sentenced to the custody of the State Board of Corrections to serve the maximum allowed sentence, a fixed determinate term of life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. And on count 5, the conspiracy to commit the first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell, you're sentenced to the custody of the State Board of Corrections to serve the maximum allowed sentence, a fixed determinate term of life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. Finally, the court will address count 7, which is the charge of grand theft. On that charge, court is going to sentence you to a fixed determinate term of 5 years of prison, followed by an indeterminate term of 5 years of prison for a total 10-year term of imprisonment on the grand theft. Court will next consider whether sentences should be imposed consecutively or concurrently. I generally don't, I'm a pragmatic person, and I've struggled with the point of a consecutive sentence when in Idaho, a life sentence is just that, a life sentence without parole. And I've thought it through. However, when I looked at this case and the more I thought about it, I've determined that because there are 3 separate murders with 3 separate victims that occurred at 3 separate times, then running counts concurrently would not serve the interests of justice, because those crimes all need to be taken into account separately and distinctly and individually. And you need to be held accountable separately for each of the 3 murders. So on those counts, the court will run consecutively the count 2 murder of Tylee Ryan, consecutive to count 4, the murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow, and count 5 will run consecutive to count 2 and 4, the conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tamara Tammy Daybell. So 3 consecutive life terms of prison. The remaining counts will be concurrent to the counts that are consecutive. The court will impose fines as requested by the state in the amount of $25,000 for all counts except the grand theft. On the grand theft, the fine will be in the amount of $1,000. The court will assess the civil penalty that was requested, and I find it's appropriate under Idaho Code 195307 of $5,000 per victim on each of the 3 victims as a civil penalty. And then finally, the restitution, which was requested by the state. Mr. Wood, if you could reiterate that number, $22,000, of what the restitution term is. And I want to inquire if there's any other restitution being sought by the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. I believe I said $22,545. And the state would ask for an additional 30 days to submit any further restitution for the victims, living victims who have been deemed as such by this court.
The court will assess that restitution on the grand theft charge of $22,545 as shown through the evidence at trial. And the court will allow 30 days for additional restitution requests, but that will be waived if it's not submitted timely. That'll conclude the court's sentencing on the charges. Mr. Thomas, do you have any questions on the sentence?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right, Mr. Wood, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
All right, counsel, before we conclude, and Ms. Vallow, importantly, I need to advise you of the rights you have now. You do have the right to appeal to the Idaho Supreme Court from this judge.
Okay, that's where we're going to stop. But as you can see, Judge Boyce wasn't playing. Because of the seriousness and the circumstances of the 3 murders, those run consecutively, means life, even though he says it's a pragmatic man. He normally doesn't see the use of that, but he wants to make an example of her because of the hideousness of these crimes. And the other 3 life sentences run concurrently with those. And then I imagine the first 10 years will be the 10 years for the theft. And then in addition to that, as I was adding there, she's got right at $51,000 in restitution she's got to pay, plus whatever the state comes up with in the next 30 days. Now, they will never collect a penny of that. I mean, they'll attach what little bit of assets she has that her lawyers don't get for payment, and use that, and then whatever she earns by virtue of making the license plates or whatever Idaho has their prisoners do, they'll take the few pennies a day she makes for that towards that as well. But then again, we're going to have the state of Idaho is going to have a huge tax bill to feed her skanky ass. But anyway, that's the sentencing. We close the chapter on this particular case and wait to see what happens with Mr. Daybell. And my heart goes out to all of those affected. It's been a long, tragic road, and some of them will never recover. Those are the true victims and the ones you need to remember. And until next time, keep on crying.